Have you ever been erased from a family gathering so completely that it felt like you'd been deleted from the family itself? That's exactly what happened to me 2 weeks before last Thanksgiving, and trust me, they didn't just forget to send me the invite. They made sure I knew I wasn't welcome. What they didn't expect, though, was that I'd respond by throwing the most unforgettable Thanksgiving party anyone in our coastal town had ever seen, at my $5 million oceanfront villa. And when I say unforgettable, I mean it. My party ended up in the local paper, on Instagram Reels, and even on the holiday segment of the evening news. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real story isn't about the champagne fountains or the live jazz band on my patio, it's about why my own family cut me out of the holiday in the first place, and how my revenge came wrapped in satin napkins, gourmet truffle stuffing, and a fireworks show over the Atlantic. If you're enjoying this so far, hit subscribe, tap the like button, and tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to know. Anyway, I should introduce myself. I'm Amira Khalid, 34 years old, and until last year I was the black sheep of the Khalid family, not because I'd done something terrible, but because I'd done something different. I built a tech startup from scratch, sold it at 32, and bought the oceanfront property of my dreams here in Charleston, South Carolina. For some reason, that made me a little too out of touch for the rest of my family, or maybe just too hard to control. Last year's Thanksgiving should have been my turn to host, but instead, I got that phone call from my sister, Layla. The one that set everything in motion. It started with her saying, in that overly polite voice she uses when she's hiding something, "So, Amira, we were thinking this year might be a little more intimate." Now, when Layla says intimate, she doesn't mean candles and heartfelt speeches. In our family, intimate is code for you're not invited, but we're trying to make it sound polite so you can't accuse us of being petty. I could hear the clinking of wine glasses in the background while she spoke. It was a weekday morning. Who was over at her house this early, drinking wine? My stomach tightened. Intimate how? I asked, keeping my voice light. "Oh, she said, stretching the words like they were taffy, "just Mom, Dad, me, and a few of the cousins." I knew exactly what that meant. All my siblings, aunts, uncles, everyone, just not me. I laughed, but it came out brittle. Right, because God forbid the woman with a fully stocked professional kitchen and an ocean view host the holiday this year. She gave this little fake chuckle, the kind where you can hear the eyes rolling. "Amira, it's not like that. It's just. After last year." Last year. The moment she brought it up, my mind flashed back like someone had switched on a projector behind my eyes, the long dining table at my parents' place, the rows of gold-rimmed plates, and me, sitting at the far end, stuck between cousin Nadia, who never stops talking about essential oils, and Uncle Basim, who thinks every woman over 30 is running out of time. I'd made one offhand joke about my business success, just a passing comment about closing a deal. And suddenly the room had gone stiff. My father had frowned. My mother's lips pressed into that razor-thin line. And Layla? She'd smirked, as if to say, here she goes again, thinking she's better than us. So yes. I knew exactly what she meant. "You don't have to pretend, Layla," I said finally. "If you don't want me there, just say it." There was a pause, not long, but enough for me to picture her shifting in her chair, deciding whether to drop the sugarcoating. "Fine," she said, her voice clipped. "It's just, you make people uncomfortable. With the money talk. And the way you carry yourself." That last part landed like a pebble in my chest. The way I carry myself. As if being confident and refusing to shrink made me some sort of villain. "Wow," I said, smiling into the phone though my hands had gone cold. "Thanks for the honesty. I'm sure you'll find something fun to do," she replied quickly, as if offering me a consolation prize. Then she hung up. I sat there in my sunlit kitchen, phone still in my hand, staring out the wide glass doors at the sweep of ocean below. The tide was rolling in slow and steady, white foam curling over itself before sliding back into the blue. For a full minute, I didn't move. Not because I was sad, though, yes, there was a little sting there, but because my brain was already flipping through possibilities like index cards. If my family didn't want me at their table, fine. But that didn't mean I'd spend Thanksgiving moping grandmother's voice in my head, the one who always said, if they shut one door, Amira, throw open your own. And then, the idea started forming. Not just an alternative plan. Not just a friendsgiving. No, I was going to throw the party. A party so extravagant that anyone within 20 miles would wish they'd been there. A party so loud, so joyful, and so unapologetically mine that the sound of it would carry across the water, maybe even reaching the open windows of my parents' dining room. I pictured it in flashes: crystal chandeliers over long banquet tables on the patio, a jazz trio by the infinity pool, the scent of roasted duck and truffle wafting in the air, guests laughing, clinking glasses, and me right in the middle of it, in a gold silk gown, greeting everyone like royalty. Yes. That would be my Thanksgiving. But to pull it off, I'd have to plan it in less than 2 weeks. And I'd need to make it clear, without saying a single direct word, that this wasn't a reaction, it was a statement. The kind of statement that says, you can erase me from your guest list, but you'll never erase me from the conversation. I woke up the next morning with the idea still lodged in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming. Usually, when I get a big, impulsive plan, sleep dulls the edges. Not this time. This time, the plan felt sharper, clearer. It wasn't a flicker of rebellion, it was a blueprint. I poured myself a coffee, black, and sat at my marble kitchen island, opening my laptop to a blank Google document. At the top, I typed, Thanksgiving 2.0, the Oceanfront edition. The cursor blinked back at me like it was daring me to start. I began with the essentials: guest list, menu ideas, entertainment. My rule was simple: no one from my immediate family. This was about sending a message, yes, but it wasn't about awkward confrontations over cranberry sauce. I wanted joy, not drama, at least, not the in-your-face kind. By 9:30 a.m., my kitchen table was covered in open notebooks, swatches of fabric for table linens I'd been saving, and a stack of catering brochures from the last gala I attended. The scent of my coffee mingled with the salt air drifting in from the open sliding doors. I was midway through jotting down Champagne Tower, gold-rimmed coupes when my phone buzzed. It was Samir, my oldest friend and the one person who could always read me like a diary. It's 9 in the morning, Amira, he said when I picked up, voice still gravelly with sleep. Why are you texting me about truffle-infused wild rice? Because, I said, you're coming to the party of the year. At my place. Thanksgiving Day. Ah, he replied slowly, the way people do when they're putting the pieces together. So, you weren't invited to Layla's thing? I could practically hear the smirk. Don't start, I warned. This isn't about them. It's about celebrating the holiday my way. Aha. And is your way, by any chance, an over-the-top, borderline obscene display of wealth designed to make your family choke on their stuffing when they see the photos? You know me so well, I said sweetly. There was a pause, then a sigh. All right. I'm in. But you realize you're starting a war, right? Samir, I said, leaning back in my chair. They fired the first shot. When I hung up, I felt the buzz of adrenaline in my veins. But Samir's words stuck with me. You're starting a war. That was the thing. I knew my family well enough to understand that even without an explicit invite, my party would reach them. Someone would post photos. Someone would talk. And when they saw me surrounded by friends, laughing over plates of food prepared by the best chef in the city, they'd know exactly what it meant. And they wouldn't like it. By noon, I'd called a local event planner, Maya, who owed me a favor from the time I'd invested in her small business early on. She picked up on the first ring. Tell me you're free for a small miracle, I said. How small? Thanksgiving. Oceanfront villa. 2 weeks. There was a sharp intake of breath. Amira. You're insane. That's not a no. Fine. But we're going to need to pull every contact I have, and you're not allowed to question my decisions about lighting or florals. Deal, I said. The rest of the day blurred into a frenzy of calls: caterers, musicians, a boutique rental company for the extra seating and long harvest tables. My phone battery was at 8% by the time I realized I hadn't eaten lunch. Just as I was shutting my laptop for the night, I got a text from an unknown number. It said, heard you're planning something big. Word gets around. No name. No emoji. Nothing. I stared at it for a long moment, my pulse ticking faster. It could have been one of my friends teasing me. Or it could have been Layla. I must have stared at that text for a full 2 minutes, my phone resting in my palm like a live wire. Heard you're planning something big. Word gets around. The wording bothered me. Not just because it sounded vaguely threatening, but because of the way it was delivered. No name. No friendly tone. It wasn't "Hey, heard you're throwing a party, can't wait." It was clinical. Almost surgical. I tapped on the number. No contact saved. Area code, Charleston local. My gut tightened. That narrowed it down to hundreds of people I knew, maybe more if you counted plus ones and acquaintances. My first instinct was Layla. She had this habit of sending passive-aggressive messages from burner accounts when she didn't want something traced back to her. But the phrasing didn't sound like her. Layla's texts always had at least one unnecessary exclamation point. Then I thought about my cousin Tariq, who had an infuriating way of lurking on social media without posting anything himself. He lived for gossip. He'd hear about my party, then drop a little breadcrumb in the group chat just to stir the pot. Or maybe it was one of the caterers. Word travels fast in this town, especially when you book top-tier talent on short notice. Gossip is practically a second currency in Charleston. I typed back a single question mark. My thumb hovered over send, then I stopped. No. If they wanted me to bite, I wasn't going to give them that satisfaction. Instead, I locked my phone, tossed it onto the couch, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did matter. The text gnawed at the edges of my focus all evening. Every time I walked past my phone, I half expected it to light up again. It didn't. By the next morning, I'd convinced myself it was nothing. But when Maya came by for our first in-person planning session, I casually mentioned it. She froze mid-sip of her iced latte. What did the message say again? I repeated it. She tilted her head, eyes narrowing in thought. That sounds like the kind of thing you get before a business rival tries to poach your event staff, she said slowly. Or, I said, before a family member decides to crash the party they weren't invited to. Maya smirked. Your family sounds exhausting. You have no idea, I muttered. We spread her swatches and sample menus across my dining table. She was efficient, moving like someone assembling a puzzle she'd already solved in her head. But I noticed something every so often. She'd glance toward the windows, like she was checking for movement outside. Finally, I asked, Maya, why do you keep looking out there? She hesitated, then shrugged. Could just be me being paranoid, but when I pulled up, there was a car idling at the end of your driveway. Didn't see the driver. By the time I parked, it was gone. That little coil of unease in my stomach twisted tighter. What kind of car? I asked. Black SUV. No plates in the front. I tried to brush it off, but all through our meeting, I kept picturing it. A dark car sitting at the edge of my property, the driver watching my villa, maybe even taking photos. By the time Maya left, the sun was dipping low, painting the sky in sherbet pinks and golds. I stood on my balcony, scanning the street below. Nothing. Just the gentle roll of the tide and the occasional jogger. Still, I locked every door that night, even the ones upstairs I never use. And when I finally went to bed, I slipped my phone under my pillow, just in case the mystery texter decided to follow up. If you've ever tried to plan a high-end event in 2 weeks, you know it's basically like trying to build a castle during a hurricane, glamorous in theory, but every wave that hits you makes you wonder why you even started. By day 3 of planning, the shine of my grand Thanksgiving revenge fantasy was starting to dull under the grind of actual execution. First, the caterer I wanted, the caterer, the one who once served Oprah during her Charleston visit, was fully booked for Thanksgiving. The woman on the phone said it in that syrupy southern way that made it sound polite, but the subtext was clear: we're already cooking for someone more important than you. I almost hung up. But instead, I said, double whatever they're paying you. She hesitated for maybe 2 seconds before replying, let me see if we can rearrange some things. Translation. Money talks, even during the holidays. The small victory didn't last long. 2 hours later, my rental company called to say that the 12-foot harvest tables I'd envisioned for my patio were unavailable. Some vineyard wedding had scooped them up months ago. "We can do 6-foot tables," the sales rep offered cheerfully, "and just push them together." I pictured a patchwork of mismatched seams and uneven legs. "Absolutely not. Find me 12-foot tables," I told her. "I don't care if you have to bring them in from Savannah." She laughed nervously, but I could hear the keyboard clacking in the background. Then there was the band. The jazz trio I wanted was available, yay, but the lead saxophonist insisted he wouldn't perform outdoors unless there was a covered stage with side paneling to protect him from sea air corrosion. Sea air corrosion. As if the man was made of silver and would tarnish the moment he inhaled. Still, I agreed to it. Because if I wanted this party to make waves, figuratively and literally, every detail had to be flawless. By the end of the day, I had more open browser tabs than my laptop could handle. Seating charts, tent rentals, lighting design, florist quotes, linen patterns. My head throbbed from switching between tabs, my coffee had gone cold twice without me noticing, and my phone battery had been drained to 0 3 times. The worst part. Samir kept sending me memes about petty Thanksgiving revenge, as if to remind me that this whole thing was petty, technically. Which it was, but that didn't make it any less necessary. I think the real frustration set in when Maya came by for another planning session and, after an hour of comparing floral arrangements, she said casually, "So, have you decided who's giving the toast?" I froze mid-sip of my espresso. I hadn't thought about that. "I'll give it," I said after a beat. Maya frowned. "No offense, Amira, but you might want someone else to do the talking. You don't want it to look like you're, making a statement." I stared at her. "Maya, the entire party is a statement." She laughed, but it wasn't her usual laugh. It was lighter, almost like she was trying to keep things casual. I caught the flicker of something in her expression, hesitation, maybe even concern. And for the first time, I wondered if she was starting to think this party was a bad idea. That stung. Not because I needed her approval, but because Maya was the one person helping me hold the whole thing together logistically. If she started doubting me now, the whole machine could fall apart. I took a deep breath, plastered on my most confident smile, and said, "Don't worry. This is going to be the kind of Thanksgiving people tell stories about for years." But deep down, as I looked at the growing mountain of problems, I was starting to wonder if I'd bitten off more than I could chew. I woke up the next morning determined not to let the previous day's disasters rattle me. If there was one thing building a tech company had taught me, it was that chaos could be turned into opportunity if you were willing to pivot. So, I pivoted. First on the agenda, the tables. Since the 12-foot harvest tables were proving elusive, I called an antiques dealer I'd met at a charity gala last spring. His name was Colin, and he specialized in salvaging rare wood pieces from historic estates. When I explained what I needed, his voice lit up. "I've got something that might work. 4 hand-carved mahogany banquet tables from a defunct governor's mansion. Each is 11.5 feet long. 11.5. Close enough." 2 hours later, I was standing in Colin's cavernous warehouse, running my hands over the rich, polished surface of the tables. They were magnificent, each with ornate legs and inlaid floral patterns that caught the light like they were winking at me. "They'll need to be delivered by next week," I told him. "For you." "I'll make it happen," he said, and just like that, one of my biggest problems evaporated. The second win came in the form of an unexpected phone call. The fully booked caterer? She rang me back to say that one of her Thanksgiving clients had cancelled due to a sudden family emergency. I didn't ask questions, just wired the deposit within minutes. "We'll create a menu worthy of your view," she promised, and for the first time all week, I believed her. By midday, momentum was back on my side. Maya showed up with mock-ups of the event layout. Long tables under a canopy of string lights, lounge seating near the infinity pool, a dance floor set up just beyond the patio doors. "I know you wanted understated elegance," she said, "but given your guest list." I added a few dramatic touches. She handed me a rendering of a 12-foot ice sculpture shaped like a breaking wave, designed to hold bottles of champagne in its crest. I actually laughed, a real, unforced laugh that shook some of the tension from my shoulders. Maya, it's ridiculous, and perfect. Samir stopped by later with a box of artisan chocolates from a boutique downtown. Each truffle was shaped like a tiny seashell and painted with shimmering edible gold. Thought these could go in the gift bags, he said, flopping onto my couch like he owned the place. Gift bags? I asked, raising an eyebrow. Please, if you're going to throw a party this petty, you might as well send everyone home with a parting reminder. We ended up brainstorming what those bags could include: monogrammed linen napkins, mini bottles of locally distilled rum, and a card printed with the phrase "Thank you for being part of my chosen family" in elegant gold script. I pictured my guests, not just friends, but neighbors, colleagues, and a few acquaintances who'd been on the fringes of my social circle, leaving with those bags. And I pictured the inevitable moment when one of those bags ended up in the hands of someone in my actual family. That image alone sent a warm ripple through me. The real turning point came as the sun dipped low, casting an amber glow over the ocean. I stepped out onto the balcony with a glass of wine and looked down at the expanse of my patio. For the first time, I could see it, the flicker of candlelight in crystal holders, the low hum of music, the clink of glasses as laughter rolled over the waves. It was no longer just an act of defiance. It was a celebration of my home, my success, and the people who appreciated me for exactly who I was. And as that vision settled into my bones, I knew. No matter what texts, black SUVs, or logistical headaches came my way, this party was going to happen. It was the Monday before Thanksgiving when the first real confrontation happened. And it came from exactly where I least wanted it to, my mother. She called at 8:12 a.m., the time she usually reserves for complaining about the price of fresh produce or reminding me to settle down with a nice man. Her voice was brisk, clipped, no small talk. "Your sister tells me you're planning something." There it was. No good morning. No how are you. Just straight to the indictment. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the to-do list I'd been scribbling over breakfast. "Define something," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "A gathering. A production. On Thanksgiving Day." The way she said production made it sound like I was staging a Broadway musical in my backyard. "I am having some friends over." "Yes," I said. "It's my home, my kitchen, my dining tables." There was a pause on the line, long enough for me to imagine her pursing her lips. "You know this will upset people," she said finally. "Mother," I replied, "people were already upset when they disinvited me." "It's not about the invitation," she snapped. "It's about making a scene." I felt heat rising in my chest. If I wanted to make a scene, I'd show up at Layla's dinner in a floor-length gown with my own carving knife. Silence. Then, "Amira, you have to think about appearances. Family unity. What will people say?" I almost laughed. What will people say? The eternal question that seemed to govern every colored family decision, from the clothes we wore to the jobs we pursued. "People will say I hosted a beautiful Thanksgiving for people I care about," I said. Her voice softened, but not in a way that suggested warmth. It was the softness of velvet hiding steel. "Your father is worried. This, a performance of yours, could make him look bad." That did it. The absurdity of it all. I was the one cast out, and yet somehow I was the liability. If my existence makes him look bad, that's his problem, not mine. There was a sharp inhale on the other end, the sound of someone who has just realized the conversation is over. "I hope you know what you're doing," she said, and hung up. I stared at the phone, my pulse pounding. I hated that even after everything, her disapproval still had the power to rattle me. But underneath that sting was something else, something sharper. Defiance. I opened my laptop, pulled up the latest seating chart, and started rearranging. If they thought I'd back down, they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. By the time I'd shaken off my mother's phone call, I thought the worst of the day was over. I was wrong. It started with Maya calling just after lunch. Her voice had that taut, clipped quality that planners get when something's gone sideways. The tent company just called. The custom canopy we ordered for the patio? It's gone. Gone. I repeated. What do you mean gone? Apparently, the client who had it reserved before us came back, offered them triple the price, and they decided to honor the first-come rule. They're refunding us. I pressed my fingers to my temples. The canopy wasn't just for aesthetics, it was a shield against the inevitable Atlantic wind. Without it, my candlelit fantasy could turn into a scene from a weather disaster reel. So we find another, I said flatly. Already looking, she said. But it's Thanksgiving week. Every decent tent in the Tri-County area is booked. As if on cue, my phone buzzed with another incoming call, this time from Colin, my antiques contact. Bad news, he said before I could even greet him. The mahogany banquet tables are stuck in transit. The trucking company's driver got the flu, and they can't guarantee delivery before Friday. I actually laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. Colin, I have 24 guests arriving on Thursday who will need somewhere to sit. Flu is not an acceptable excuse. I know. I'm trying to find another driver, but everyone's booked for holiday runs. I'll keep you posted. I hung up and stared at the ocean beyond my glass doors, the horizon line blurring with the grey sky. It felt like the tide was rolling in just to wash over every bit of progress I'd made. Then came the third blow, an email from the band's manager. The saxophonist, my delicate artist, had decided he wouldn't play at all unless we built a fully enclosed stage and installed portable heaters. At that point, I wanted to call him myself and ask if he'd like a silk robe and a personal butler while we were at it. I sat there at my kitchen island, head in my hands, wondering if the universe was trying to tell me something. That maybe this was a fight I didn't need to win. That maybe walking away, letting them have their intimate family dinner without my shadow looming, would be the wiser choice. But then, as my phone buzzed again with a notification from Instagram, I saw it, a tagged photo from my cousin's account. Layla, at some pre-Thanksgiving planning brunch, surrounded by cousins, holding up champagne flutes. The caption read, "Family is everything." Oh, no. No. If anything, that post lit a fresh fire in me. This wasn't over. It was just going to be harder than I'd planned. If there's one thing I've learned about myself, it's that I can be dangerously stubborn when I feel cornered. And after that family is everything post, I was cornered. The next morning, I treated my to-do list like a battle plan. No more waiting for vendors to get back to me, no more polite inquiries. I was done playing nice. Step 1, the tent problem. I called every rental company within a 100-mile radius, and when they told me they were booked, I asked for the names of their competitors. When that list ran dry, I started calling wedding planners, photographers, even yacht charter companies. That's how I found it. A pristine white sailcloth tent, originally commissioned for a high-profile coastal wedding that had been cancelled due to a family emergency. I was starting to think these family emergencies were just blessings in disguise. It was smaller than my original canopy, but the fabric draped like something out of a magazine spread, and it came with built-in wind flaps. I wired the deposit within 10 minutes. Step 2, the table crisis. Colin called back at noon, still short a driver. I didn't even let him finish before saying, "I'll hire my own." By 3 p.m., I had a guy named Russell, a former Marine who now ran a specialty logistics company, scheduled to pick up the mahogany tables himself. His voice over the phone was deep, gravelly, and full of confidence. "If I have to strap those tables to my back and swing them to your house, you'll have them by Thursday morning." I believed him. Step 3, the band ultimatum. The saxophonist was still holding firm on his demands. I called his manager directly and said, "I'll give him the enclosed stage and the heaters, but he's playing my set list. No moody experimental numbers. I want classic holiday jazz, upbeat, nothing that makes people want to leave early." There was a pause on the other end before the manager replied, "You don't play around, do you?" "Not when I'm paying triple his rate," I said. By late afternoon, I was actually ahead. The major fires had been put out, and the plan was solidifying into something even better than I'd first imagined. Maya came by to finalize the lighting scheme, clusters of warm Edison bulbs over the tables, and subtle uplighting on the palm trees along the patio edge. When she switched on a demo strand in my living room, the golden glow reflected off the glass walls, making the whole place look like a scene from a film. "You realize," she said, "this might actually be the best event I've ever planned." "Good," I replied, "because it's also the most important." I didn't tell her that the stakes weren't just about family politics anymore. Somewhere along the way, this had stopped being purely about proving a point and had become about proving something to myself, that I could create something beautiful and generous, even under pressure, even with eyes watching and waiting for me to fail. And by the time I went to bed that night, I was certain of one thing: no matter how many more obstacles popped up, I wasn't backing down. It was just after midnight when the revelation hit me. The villa was quiet except for the faint hum of the refrigerator and the rhythmic crash of waves outside. I'd been sitting at the kitchen island for hours, nursing a glass of red wine while reviewing my finalized seating chart. That's when it struck me. Every single person on that list had, at some point, shown up for me. Not for my money, not for my family name, not for the photo ops. For me. There was Sophia, my former intern, who I'd mentored when she couldn't afford college, now running her own design studio. She'd been one of the first to RSVP. There was Dr. Bennett, my neighbor 2 doors down, who once drove me to urgent care when I sliced my hand on a stubborn oyster shell. There was even Mark, the soft-spoken bartender from the wine bar downtown, who always remembered my order and never made me feel self-conscious for sitting alone. Looking at their names, I realized something important: this wasn't a backup Thanksgiving. This was Thanksgiving. For years, I'd treated the family dinner as the default, the real holiday, and everything else was an afterthought. But staring at that guest list, I felt something loosen in my chest. These people were my family. Not the ones who shared my blood, but the ones who showed up without keeping score. The ones who never made me feel like I had to shrink to fit a mold. It made me wonder, maybe the party wasn't about proving my worth to the Cullids at all. Maybe it was about celebrating the people who already saw it. That thought shifted something deep inside me. The defiance was still there, it was still there, but it was joined by a different kind of urgency. A desire to make the night perfect for them, not just as a statement to the ones who'd excluded me. I pulled out a fresh notepad and began scribbling new details. A welcome drink inspired by each guest's personality. A playlist that blended classics with songs I knew certain guests loved. A dessert table featuring dishes contributed by attendees, not because I needed the help, but because it would weave them into the night in a tangible way. By the time I put the pen down, my wine was gone, and the clock read 2:14 a.m. But I wasn't tired. I was awake in the way you get when you've been wandering in the dark and suddenly see the path lit up in front of you. This wasn't going to be just a party. It was going to be a thank you. One my chosen family would never forget. By Tuesday morning, the villa had transformed into a construction zone. Rental trucks lined the driveway, the sound of drills and hammering echoing through the sea air. Inside, every flat surface was covered in something: stacks of wine glasses, crates of silver chargers, rolls of cream linen. It should have felt overwhelming. Instead, it felt electric. Maya was in the backyard directing the tent crew, barking instructions through a headset like she was commanding a SWAT operation. Russell, my ex-Marine table savior, had just arrived with the mahogany beauties strapped into his truck bed like sacred relics. I stood in the driveway watching him unload, and for a moment, everything felt perfectly on track. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my cousin Tariq. "So, heard about your little party. Brave move. Hope you don't mind if I stop by with a few friends." I read it twice, my pulse kicking into overdrive. This wasn't an RSVP, it was a warning. Tariq was the kind of guest who didn't just show up, he brought chaos. Loud, uninvited chaos. I typed back, "Sorry, Tariq. Guest list is final. It's an intimate event." I hit send before I could overthink it. Less than a minute later, he replied with a single emoji, the smirking face. I slipped my phone into my back pocket and went to check on the kitchen. The caterer's prep team had arrived early, unloading boxes of fresh produce, whole ducks, and trays of seafood onto my countertops. The air was already thick with the scent of garlic and rosemary. That's when the next problem hit. One of the sous chefs, a wiry man with a permanent scowl, pulled me aside. "We've got an issue with the oysters," he said. "What kind of issue?" "The supplier sent half the order. We won't have enough for the first course." I closed my eyes for a moment. The oysters weren't just a menu item, they were a statement. Locally sourced, freshly shucked at the table, they were meant to set the tone for the entire meal. "Call another supplier," I said. "Already did. Everyone's sold out for the holiday." I took a breath, forcing myself to think. Then I remembered, Dr. Bennett's brother ran a fishing boat. I'd once overheard him bragging about his private oyster beds. Within 15 minutes, I had a fresh order lined up, more than enough to cover the shortage. And Bennett promised his brother would deliver them himself by Thursday morning. Crisis averted, for now. But as the day wore on, I couldn't shake the tension buzzing under my skin. Between Tariq's not-so-subtle threat, the unexpected food hiccup, and the constant parade of delivery trucks, the party had gone from a bold idea to something more volatile. And with every problem solved, I knew another one was waiting just around the corner. By Wednesday afternoon, the villa felt like it was breathing too fast, every room buzzing, every hallway crammed with people and boxes and urgent conversations. The sailcloth tent was finally up, glowing softly in the late sun, but inside, half the string lights were still in coils on the ground because the electrician had been called away to another job. The mahogany tables were sitting like silent royalty in my garage, waiting for the Polish team, who were now 2 hours late. In the kitchen, the caterer was locked in a verbal sparring match with Maya about the plating design. The rosemary sprigs should be angled inward, the caterer insisted. "Not if you want the photos to look balanced," Maya shot back. I wedged myself between them and said, "Angle them however you want, just get the food tasting perfect." Neither of them looked happy with that answer, but at least they went back to work. Then Samir showed up, which under normal circumstances would have been a relief. But he came bearing news I did not want. "Saw Tariq at the marina," he said. He was loading coolers into the back of his SUV and telling anyone who would listen about crashing your party. "He's not getting in," I said, more firmly than I felt. "You gonna post security at the driveway?" he asked. The thought made my stomach clench. Security at Thanksgiving. What had I turned this into? Still, the idea wasn't insane, so I called a contact from a local events firm and booked 2 plainclothes guards to quietly monitor the perimeter. By the time evening fell, I was pacing my balcony with my phone glued to my ear, juggling last-minute confirmations. One of the musicians had come down with a fever, not the saxophonist, unfortunately, and I was frantically trying to find a replacement pianist who could sight-read my set list with less than 24 hours notice. Every time I thought I had a moment to breathe, something else broke. One of the outdoor heaters wouldn't ignite. The ice sculpture delivery window got moved to sometime afternoon, which was dangerously vague. And then, as if the universe wanted to test me further, I got another text from that same unknown number. "Big day tomorrow. Hope you're ready." I gripped the railing so hard my knuckles ached. Was this a threat? A joke? Both? I typed out half a dozen replies, deleted them all, and finally shoved my phone in my pocket. I couldn't waste mental energy on ghosts. Still, when I went to bed that night, the villa didn't feel like my safe haven anymore. It felt like a chessboard, every piece in motion, every move being watched. And I knew that if even one piece fell out of place tomorrow, the whole board could collapse. I woke before the sun, not to the sound of alarms or frantic calls, but to the low, steady rumble of the ocean outside my windows. For the first time in days, my heart wasn't pounding. Today wasn't about scrambling anymore. Today was about delivering. I pulled on a silk robe, padded into the kitchen, and brewed a pot of strong coffee. The air was still cool, the kind that carries a salty tang from the water, and I stepped out onto my balcony to watch the horizon bleed from navy to gold. The villa was still, but not for long. In less than an hour, the place would hum to life. And for once, I felt ready. By the time the catering team arrived, I was already dressed in my first outfit of the day, a sleek ivory jumpsuit cinched with a gold belt, chosen for maximum mobility while still making me look like I belonged in a magazine spread. Maya walked in, took one look at me, and grinned. "You're terrifyingly calm," she said. "That's because everything is exactly where it needs to be," I replied, and for once, it was true. The tables had been delivered and polished to a mirror sheen. The sailcloth tent fluttered lightly in the breeze, strung with hundreds of glowing bulbs. The mahogany banquet tables gleamed under perfectly pressed linen runners. And in the corner of the patio, the ice sculpture, all 12 feet of cresting frozen wave, stood shimmering in the early light, champagne bottles already nestled in its curve. Even the band had arrived on time, the saxophonist taking a deep breath of sea air without collapsing into a coughing fit, which I took as a silent victory. I moved through the space, checking details, the flick of a candlewick here, the straightening of a charger plate there. The staff greeted me like I was the general before a parade, each with their own small update. "Oysters are prepped and chilling," one of the sous chefs reported. "Florals are being misted now," the florist's assistant chimed in. Every detail was locked. Every problem had been solved. By noon, I was standing on the patio, the wind catching my hair as I looked out at the Atlantic. The tented tables stretched before me, the scent of roasted duck and spiced sweet potatoes drifting from the kitchen. I could hear the clink of glasses being arranged at the bar, the faint sound of the pianist warming up. And in that moment, I realized the party had already succeeded. It didn't matter if my family saw it, or if Tariq tried to crash, or if that anonymous texter turned out to be some petty spy. I'd taken something meant to hurt me and turned it into something magnificent. Maya appeared at my side with a clipboard. "Guests start arriving in 20 minutes, she said. "You ready?" I smiled, the kind that comes from deep in the bones. More than Ria. Ready. With 20 minutes to go, I went into what I can only describe as host as tactician mode. This wasn't just a dinner, it was a performance, and every person walking through my front gates would be both audience and actor. First, I reviewed the guest flow with Maya. "Cocktails and oysters start on the balcony," I said, tracing the air with my finger. "Then we move them toward the tent just before sunset. That way, when they sit down, the light is perfect for photos." She nodded, making a note. We both knew perfect for photos was code for perfect for posting. I didn't need to shove this night in my family's face directly, the right Instagram stories from the right people would do it for me. Next, I checked in with the security team I'd quietly stationed at the driveway. They were dressed like well-heeled guests, champagne flutes in hand, but their eyes never stopped scanning the perimeter. If anyone arrives not on the list, I told them, be polite, but firm. And if they insist, call me first. I didn't say especially if it's my cousin Tariq, but I didn't have to. They'd been briefed. Then I moved to the kitchen. The head caterer was slicing pomegranate seeds into perfect halves for garnish. "After the oysters, I want the soup course time to arrive just as the sun touches the horizon," I said. "It's going to photograph like a dream." She raised an eyebrow. "You think like a cinematographer." "That's because this night is a movie," I replied. Upstairs, I'd laid out my second outfit, a gold silk gown with a plunging back, ready for the moment dinner gave way to dancing. I even had a backup pair of heels stashed in the powder room in case the first ones became unbearable. Back downstairs, Samir was checking the playlist I'd given the band. "They tried to sneak in an experimental number," he told me, smirking. "I told them you'd personally toss the sax player into the pool if he played it." "Good man," I said, clapping him on the shoulder. With 10 minutes left, I stood in the center of the patio and just took it in. The soft glow of the string lights, the low hum of the pianist's warm-up, the way the ocean seemed to lean in, as if it too wanted to watch. This wasn't luck. This wasn't chance. This was the result of every call, every pivot, every late-night note scribbled between sips of wine. And in my bones, I knew whatever happened tonight, I was ready for it. The first guest arrived right on time, Sophia, my former intern, now effortlessly chic in a sapphire dress that caught the afternoon light. She hugged me tight, her eyes widening as she took in the tent, the tables, The way the ocean framed everything like a painting. "Amira, this is insane," she whispered. "In the best possible way." Soon after, the flow began, neighbors, friends, colleagues. Laughter drifted through the air, mixing with the clink of glasses and the soft strains of jazz. The oyster bar became an instant crowd magnet. Guests gathered around as Bennett's brother shucked them with practiced speed. I moved between groups like a conductor, making introductions, steering conversations, ensuring no one ever stood alone. Every smile I received, every little gasp at a detail, added fuel to the quiet fire burning inside me. Then, about 20 minutes in, I spotted him. Tariq. Not at the front gates, no, he was smarter than that. He'd slipped in with a pair of mutual acquaintances, one of them waving a hand as if vouching for him. He was dressed like he belonged, navy blazer, open collar, a champagne flute already in hand. My stomach tightened. I could have marched over and made a scene, but that's what he wanted. No, if Tariq was going to be here, I was going to control the narrative. I crossed the patio toward him, my smile smooth as silk. "Tariq," I said warmly, as though I'd been expecting him. "So glad you could make it." He blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, figured I'd swing by." "Of course you did," I replied, resting a hand lightly on his arm. "Let me introduce you to someone." I led him straight to a group of my most polished, intimidating guests, 2 venture capitalists and a retired ambassador, then excused myself before he could wriggle away. If he wanted to crash, he'd spend the night out of his depth. It was a small move, but it shifted something. I realized I didn't need to fight him off the property to win, I just needed to ensure he played by my rules. And for the first time since the planning began, I felt the power tilt fully into my hands. It was just after sunset when I felt the first ripple of unease. The party was in full swing, the tent glowing like a lantern against the deepening sky, champagne flowing, the scent of roasted duck weaving through the salt air. Guests laughed under the canopy while the pianist slid effortlessly into autumn leaves. Everything looked perfect. Too perfect. I was speaking with Dr. Bennett when Maya appeared at my elbow, her face the kind of calm you only wear when you're hiding urgency. "We have a problem," she murmured. I excused myself and followed her to the far end of the patio, where one of the plainclothes security guards was waiting. "Someone's trying to get in," he said. "Claims they're on the list, but they're not. And they're insisting." I moved closer, and that's when I saw her. Layla. She was standing at the gate in a cream coat, her hair perfectly styled, a faintly pitying smile on her lips, the same smile she'd worn when she'd uninvited me over the phone. My first thought was, she's here to make a scene. My second thought was, I can't let her take the spotlight. "Let her in," I said finally. The guard stepped aside, and Layla walked in as though she'd been invited all along. "Nice setup," she said, her eyes sweeping the tent. "You've been busy." "Some of us find ways to keep busy when we're not on the family roster," I replied. She smiled like she hadn't heard the jab. "I thought I'd drop by, see what all the fuss was about." And that was the risk, not that she'd cause some dramatic scene in front of everyone, but that she'd quietly work the crowd, framing this as some desperate overcompensation on my part. I had seconds to decide how to play it. I could try to keep her at a distance all night, or I could go in the opposite direction and make her presence part of the show. I chose the latter. "You came just in time," I said, looping my arm through hers. I was about to make the toast. She stiffened slightly, but I guided her toward the center of the tent, where the guests were gathering for the first course. If she wanted to watch, she could do it front and center with no chance to twist the narrative behind my back. As the crowd turned toward me, I felt that same current I'd felt on the balcony earlier, the sense that everything balanced on the next few minutes. If I played this right, the night would be mine. If I didn't, I'd be the one left out in the cold. The chatter quieted as I stepped forward, champagne flute in hand, the warm glow of the string lights pooling around us. The ocean's hush was a steady undertone, the kind of sound that makes every pause feel more deliberate. Layla stood just off to my right, her face a polite mask, calm enough to fool anyone who didn't know her, but I could see the calculation in her eyes. "First," I began, my voice carrying easily under the tent, Thank you all for being here tonight. You could have been anywhere for Thanksgiving, but you chose to be here in my home, by my table, sharing this moment. I let my gaze drift across the crowd. Sophia beamed at me. Dr. Bennett gave a little nod. Even the venture capitalists looked like they were listening. When I first started planning this evening, I continued, it was meant to be small, intimate. But then I realized something. I took a breath, let it hang. Family isn't just the people you're related to. It's the people who choose to show up for you, time and again. And tonight is about celebrating that family. I felt Layla shift beside me, a subtle tightening of her shoulders. She knew exactly what I was doing. So, to my chosen family, I said, raising my glass, thank you. For your loyalty, your friendship, and your trust. May we always find ways to gather, no matter what lists we are or aren't on. A ripple of knowing laughter passed through the crowd. Glasses clinked. The band slid seamlessly into the next song. I turned slightly toward Layla, catching her eye. Would you like to add anything? It was a gamble. In front of everyone, she could either decline and look small, or accept and risk stumbling into my arena. She took the glass from her lips and smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. Just that. I can see you've outdone yourself, she said, her tone smooth. It's impressive. Polite applause followed, but the subtle edge in her voice was sharp enough to cut through the night air. Why, thank you, I replied, my smile easy. I'll be sure to send you the name of my planner. A few guests chuckled, not quite sure if they were witnessing banter or battle. That was exactly how I wanted it, layered, ambiguous, impossible to pin down. Because this wasn't just about winning in front of her. It was about making sure everyone here understood that I'd already won. Dinner unfolded like a carefully choreographed dance. The soup course arrived exactly as the sun brushed the horizon, the bowls steaming against the cooling air. Guests leaned in over the mahogany tables, their laughter carrying under the canopy of lights. The band kept the mood buoyant, a steady current of jazz threading between conversations. I made sure to work the room with purpose. Every time I passed Layla, she was mid-conversation with someone I'd already charmed earlier in the night, which meant whatever version of events she might spin would have to contend with my version, told directly and warmly to their faces. When dessert was served, an array of handmade tarts, truffles, and my personal favorite, pumpkin creme brulee, I saw Layla standing alone for the first time all night. I approached, 2 plates in hand. You should try this one, I said, offering her the creme brulee. It's not as sweet as you'd expect. She took it, studying me over the rim of her plate. You've made your point, she said finally. And what point is that? Her lips twitched, almost into a smile. That you don't need us. I let the silence sit for a beat before replying. It's not that I don't need you. It's that I can thrive without you. She glanced away, watching a group of guests laughing near the bar. Well, she said, you certainly know how to put on a show. It's not a show, I said, my voice soft but steady. It's my life. You're just not used to seeing it up close. Before she could respond, Samir appeared at my side, pulling me toward the dance floor. The band had shifted into something lively, and guests were swaying under the lights. I let him spin me once, my gown catching the glow, the ocean wind lifting my hair. By the time I glanced back toward where Layla had been standing, she was gone. It didn't matter. The night was already mine. When the last song played and the final guests drifted toward the gates, I stood at the edge of the patio, looking out at the dark water. The tent lights reflected in the glassy waves, and the air was filled with the faint scent of extinguished candles. I'd done it. I'd turned exclusion into celebration, and every person here would remember it not as a stunt, but as a moment of genuine connection and beauty. And if my family talked about it later, so be it. I wasn't hiding anymore. The villa was quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet from the night before. This quiet was full. Full of laughter that still seemed to hum in the walls, of footsteps that had crossed my patio, of glasses raised under the glow of the tent lights. I walked through the aftermath like I was strolling through a gallery, the long tables still set, though half-empty wine bottles leaned lazily between the candlesticks. A single gold napkin sat folded neatly where someone had left it untouched, the faint scent of rosemary and roasted duck still lingering in the air. The ocean beyond was black now, its surface broken only by the occasional crest of foam. I stepped out onto the balcony, the salt air cool on my skin, and leaned against the railing. I thought back to that phone call from Layla, the word intimate delivered like a scalpel, the not-so-hidden message beneath it. How small I'd felt in that moment, like someone had quietly closed a door and left me outside in the cold. But standing here now, I didn't feel small. I felt steady. Because somewhere between the first RSVP and the last toast, this had stopped being about proving myself to the Cullids. Tonight was about proving something to me, that I could create a space where people felt welcome, where the table stretched as long as it needed to, where no one had to wonder if they belonged. I thought about Sophia's bright laugh, about Dr. Bennett leaning over the oyster bar swapping fishing stories with strangers, about Samir spinning me under the lights while the ocean wind tangled my hair. It was all still here, not in a way that could be photographed or posted, but in a way that sat deep in my bones. And I realized something else, something I hadn't let myself believe before. Even if they never invited me again, I'd be fine. Better than fine. I left the balcony and padded barefoot through the villa, turning off the last of the lights. The glow from the tent outside spilled faintly across the polished floors, a reminder of what the night had been. In the kitchen, a few champagne coupes were still scattered across the island, the remnants of the towering display that had greeted my guests. I traced a finger along one rim, remembering the exact moment I'd stood there earlier, just before the first knock at the door. Feeling the same quiet hum in my chest I felt now. That was when it hit me, this was the real win. Not the ice sculpture, not the catered duck, not even the look on Layla's face when I'd pulled her into the center of my toast. It was knowing I'd filled my home with people who didn't have to be convinced to care, people who chose to be here, who weren't here out of duty or obligation, but because they wanted to be part of my story. And I couldn't help but think back to the question I'd asked myself at the start, the one that had hovered in my mind since that phone call. Have you ever been erased from a family gathering so completely it felt like you'd been deleted from the family itself? Yes, I had. And maybe that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because it forced me to build my own table and fill it with people who brought more to it than just a last name. I smiled to myself, blew out the final candle, and let the darkness settle. The ocean kept rolling in the distance, steady and unbothered, as if to say, life keeps moving, whether you're invited or not. And now, I didn't need an invitation to feel at home. If you want more stories like this, subscribe, give this a like, and share where you're tuning in from in the comments.